They thought they were invincible until special forces arrived. The golden spires of Prime gleamed against the purple sky like knives thrust into the heart of heaven. Admiral Han stood on the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching his fleet of 3,000 vessels move into position around the human colony world of New Terra. His four arms crossed behind his back in a gesture of supreme confidence, while his crystalline eyes reflected the light of the distant star. "Admiral," came the melodic voice of his tactical officer, Lieutenant Ara, "our sensors detect minimal defensive capabilities, 3 orbital platforms, a handful of patrol craft, and what appears to be a small garrison on the surface. Total estimated population, 12 million humans." Han's mandibles clicked in amusement. The Empire had conquered 47 worlds in the past cycle, each victory adding to their reputation as the most formidable military force in the galaxy. Their technology was superior, their tactics flawless, and their will absolute. These humans, these newcomers to the galactic stage, would learn what it meant to stand against the Empire. Curious, Han mused, his voice carrying the musical quality of his species. Our intelligence suggests this world is of significant strategic importance to the human government, yet they defend it with so little. They had studied human military capabilities extensively. They had observed the humans' clumsy attempts at space warfare, their primitive energy weapons, their sluggish reaction times. Most amusing of all was their biological fragility. These creatures came from a world they called Earth, a planet so mild and comfortable that it had produced beings of laughable weakness. "Perhaps they believe their reputation will protect them," suggested Commander from his position at the communications station. "The humans have spread stories of their resilience and determination throughout the galaxy. Some species have even begun to fear them." Han's laughter was like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. "Fear? Of creatures that can barely survive in environments we consider mildly uncomfortable. There has such weak gravity that they require mechanical assistance to function properly in normal conditions. Their atmospheric requirements are so specific that they die within moments of exposure to most planetary environments." The Admiral had read the reports with great interest. Earth, the human, was classified as a paradise planet. Stable climate, abundant water, moderate temperature ranges, and gravity so light that other species often used it as a vacation destination. The humans themselves were fragile bipeds with slow reflexes, limited strength, and embarrassingly short. They had somehow managed to stumble into through luck and persistence rather than any particular intelligence or capability. "Begin the bombardment," Han ordered. "Target their orbital platforms first, then their major population centers. We'll leave enough survivors to serve as examples to other human colonies." The Eternal Dominion and her escort vessels moved forward, their weapons charging with the characteristic whine of plasma cannons. The first salvo would cripple the human defenses within minutes, leaving the colony defenseless against the full might of the Empire. But as the fleet approached optimal firing range, something unexpected happened. "Admiral," Ara's voice carried a note of confusion, "I'm detecting multiple energy signatures emerging from the planetary surface. They appear to be ships, but they're unlike anything in our database." On the main display, dozens of craft rose from hidden positions across New Terra's surface. They moved with a fluidity that conventional physics, accelerating at rates that should have any organic crew. Their design was angular and predatory, like metallic sharks swimming through the void. "Impossible," Han breathed. "Our intelligence indicated no significant military presence on this world." The human ships formed up in attack formation with precision that impressed even the Admiral. Their movements were coordinated to a degree that suggested either advanced artificial intelligence or pilots with reflexes far beyond what science considered possible for human biology. "Incoming transmission," announced Commander. "They're requesting to speak with our commanding officer." "Put it through," Han commanded, curious to hear what these doomed humans might say in their final moments. The main display shifted to show the interior of what was clearly a human vessel. But the figure that appeared was unlike any human Han had seen in the intelligence reports. This one was larger, more muscular, with scars crisscrossing visible skin and eyes that held a cold, calculating intelligence. Most disturbing of all, the human appeared completely relaxed despite facing a fleet that outnumbered his forces by nearly 100 to 1. "This is Colonel Steele of the Terran Special Operations Command," the human said, his voice carrying a gravelly quality that somehow conveyed both authority and menace. "You are in violation of Terran space and are ordered to withdraw immediately." Han's mandibles clicked in amusement. "I am Admiral Han of the Imperial Fleet. Your posturing is meaningless, human. Surrender now, and perhaps some of your people will be allowed to live as slaves." The human's expression didn't change, but somehow his presence seemed to fill the screen with an aura of barely contained violence. "Admiral, you've made two critical errors in your assessment of this situation. First, you've assumed that New Terra is defended by regular human forces. Second, you've assumed that all humans come from the same type of world." "Explain," Han demanded, though he was beginning to feel the first stirrings of unease. "New Terra isn't just a colony, Admiral. It's a training facility for the most elite units in human space. And those of us who serve in the Special Operations Command don't come from Earth." The human's smile was predatory. "We come from." The term meant nothing to Han, but the way the human pronounced it sent an involuntary shiver through his crystalline form. Worlds where simply surviving to adulthood requires constant struggle against an environment that wants to kill you every moment of every day. Worlds with crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres, predators that would give your nightmares nightmares, and weather patterns that could level your cities. Colonel Steele leaned forward slightly. "We call Earth a paradise world too, Admiral. It's where we go to relax." Before Han could respond, the human ships opened fire. The Admiral had witnessed many space battles in his long career, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw in the next 30 seconds. The human weapons didn't fire energy beams or plasma bolts. They fired solid projectiles at velocities approaching a significant fraction of light speed. The rounds punched through shields like they weren't there and tore through armor plating with devastating efficiency. More shocking still was the way the human ships moved. They twisted and spun through space in patterns that should have killed their crews from the gravitational forces alone, while maintaining perfect accuracy with their weapons. It was as if the laws of physics bent around them, allowing impossible maneuvers that turned their smaller numbers into a devastating advantage. "Damage report," Han shouted over the alarms that were now blaring throughout his flagship. "We've lost 17 vessels in the opening salvo," Ara reported, her usual composure cracking. "Their weapons are unlike anything we've encountered. Our shields provide minimal protection, and their accuracy it's impossible. They're hitting targets at ranges where our computers say accurate fire should be impossible." On the tactical display, Han watched in growing horror as his numerically superior fleet was systematically dismantled by an enemy that moved like ghosts and struck like thunder. The human ship seemed to know exactly where to hit each vessel for maximum effect, targeting power cores, weapon systems, and life support with surgical precision. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "Our intelligence." "Your intelligence was based on observations of our civilian population." Colonel Steele's voice cut through the chaos on the bridge. The human's image had remained on the main display throughout the battle. "You studied farmers, merchants, and colonists living on one of the most peaceful worlds in human space. You never encountered our military, and you certainly never encountered our special forces." A massive explosion lit up the void as another cruiser succumbed to human firepower. The shockwave rattled the Eternal Dominion, and Han felt fear creep into his hearts for the first time in centuries. "You see, Admiral, while your people were building an empire through conquest of peaceful worlds, humanity was learning to survive on planets that would kill most sapient species within hours. We didn't choose to become warriors. We were forged into weapons by worlds that showed no mercy." Steele's eyes seemed to bore through the screen directly into Han's soul. "And those of us who not only survived but excelled in those environments, we became something you can't understand and can't defeat." The human ships continued their relentless assault, moving through the fleet like predators through a herd of prey animals. Each movement was calculated, each shot precisely placed, and the coordination between vessels was so perfect it seemed almost telepathic. "Admiral," Lieutenant Ara's voice was approaching panic. "We've lost over 400 ships. Our formations are collapsing, and the remaining vessels are requesting permission to withdraw." Han stared at the tactical display in disbelief. In less than 10 minutes, the pride of the Empire had been reduced to scattered, fleeing remnants. His invincible fleet was being destroyed by fewer than 60 human vessels crewed by beings from worlds he had never imagined. "This is impossible," he repeated. "You're only human." Colonel Steele's laugh was like grinding metal. Only human? Admiral, you have no idea what that means. Humanity doesn't just come from one world, we've spread to dozens of planets, each one more hostile than the last. We've adapted to crushing gravity that would pancake your people, radiation levels that would cook you in your shells, atmospheric pressures that would implode your ships, and predators that would hunt your nightmares for sport. Another wing of fighters vanished in brilliant flashes as human interceptors tore through them with impossible speed and accuracy. The human pilots seemed to anticipate every move, every tactic, every desperate maneuver that the crews attempted. We learned to fight on worlds where the very air tries to kill you, where mountains walk and storms can shatter continents. We trained in environments where your finest warriors would die screaming in the first hour. And those who excel in those conditions, those who rise to the top of humanity's special forces. Steele's image seemed to grow larger and more menacing. We are the products of 10,000, Admiral. We are what happens when evolution and training combine to create the perfect predator. The bridge of the Eternal Dominion shook as human fire finally found its mark. Systems began failing across the ship, and Han realized with crystalline clarity that he was about to die. His invincible empire, his perfect fleet, his supreme confidence, all of it had been built on a foundation of ignorance. How, he gasped as his ship began to list to starboard, how did we not know? Because you never thought to look beyond what you wanted to see, Colonel Steele replied with something that might have been pity. You saw a species you thought was weak, and you convinced yourselves that weakness was all we were capable of. You never considered that in a galaxy full of paradise worlds, humanity might have chosen to settle the places that would kill anyone else. The lights flickered on the bridge as another salvo from the human ships found critical systems. Han could feel his flagship dying around him, and with it, the illusion of invincibility. Your empire has built its reputation on conquering peaceful worlds and civilian populations, Steele continued relentlessly. Today, you learn the difference between civilians and soldiers. More importantly, you learn the difference between ordinary soldiers and special forces trained on. Through the viewports, Han could see the scattered remains of his once mighty fleet. Some ships were fleeing at maximum speed, others drifted powerless in the void, and many had simply been vaporized by weapons that seemed to violate every known principle of physics. This isn't over, he said, though even he could hear the defeat in his voice. The Empire will send more fleets. We will return with greater numbers. Colonel Steele nodded thoughtfully. Yes, you probably will. And when you do, you'll discover that New Terra is just one of our training facilities. Humanity has dozens of worlds like this scattered throughout our territory, each one defended by special forces from different, each one with its own unique approach to warfare. The implications of this statement hit Han like a physical blow. If this was just one facility, if there were others defended by similar forces. Moreover, Steele continued, news of this engagement will spread throughout human space within hours. Every who's ever wanted to test their skills against a superior, alien military will be volunteering for duty. You've just given humanity's special forces community the greatest recruitment tool in our history. The Eternal Dominion groaned as critical systems failed throughout the ship. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows across the bridge, and Han realized that his crew was looking to him for orders he couldn't give. How do you fight an enemy that operates beyond your understanding of what's possible? I'll give you one chance, Admiral, Colonel Steele said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Order your remaining ships to withdraw immediately. Broadcast a message throughout space that humanity is not to be trifled with. Do this, and we'll allow your survivors to limp home with their tails between their legs. And if I refuse? Steele's smile was terrible to behold. Then you'll discover why don't take prisoners, Admiral. We've been taught by the harshest teacher in the universe, nature itself, and nature doesn't believe in mercy. Han looked around his dying bridge, at his terrified crew, at the tactical display showing the wreckage of his dreams of conquest. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. All ships, he said into his communicator, his voice heavy with defeat. This is Admiral Han. All units are to withdraw immediately. Maximum speed to the hyperspace jump point. Wise choice, Colonel Steele said. Oh, and Admiral, when you report back to your superiors, make sure you tell them exactly what happened here. Make sure they understand that they attacked a training facility, not a military installation. Let them imagine what would happen if they encountered our actual fleet units. The transmission cut off, leaving Han alone with his failure and his fear. As the Eternal Dominion limped away from New Terra with the scattered remnants of his fleet, he found himself wondering not if the Empire would face humanity again, but whether it would survive the encounter when it did. Behind them, the human ships had already disappeared back into their hidden positions on New Terra's surface, as if the devastating battle had never happened. But Han knew that everything had changed. The galaxy's balance of power had shifted in the span of 15 minutes, and the Empire's reign of terror was about to face its greatest challenge. In the depths of space, word was already spreading. Humanity had special forces. They came from, and they were everything the galaxy's predators had nightmares about, the word spreads. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's thousand-year history. Representatives from dozens of species huddled in their environmental chambers, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and harmonic resonances that the universal translators struggled to interpret. At the center of the great chamber, the holographic display showed the same footage over and over again, the complete destruction of Admiral Han's fleet at New Terra. Ambassador Ra of the Confederacy extended her sensory stalks toward the display, her bioluminescent patches flickering with patterns that indicated deep concern. They had been one of the first species to encounter humanity, and their initial assessment had been largely positive. The humans seemed reasonable, adaptable, and surprisingly diplomatic for such a young species. "This changes everything," she spoke into her translator unit, her voice carrying the melodic undertones of her aquatic species. "We believed we understood human capabilities based on our interactions with their diplomatic and trade missions. But this is fabricated," interrupted Representative Oss of the Hegemony Coalition, his rocky form grinding as he shifted in his high-gravity chamber. "No species could achieve such tactical superiority over their military technology is centuries ahead of anything these newcomers possess." The hegemony had been one of humanity's biggest critics in the Council, arguing that the young species should be contained to their small section of the galaxy until they proved themselves capable of responsible expansion. Oss had personally drafted 3 separate resolutions calling for restrictions on human colony ships. "The footage is authentic," stated Counselor Prime from her central position. The ancient being's crystalline form pulsed with authoritative light patterns. "Our technical analysis confirms no signs of manipulation. What we witnessed was a genuine military engagement between Imperial forces and human defenders." In his environmental pod, Ambassador Eth of the Empire remained silent. The normally proud and vocal representative had said nothing since the session began, his 4 arms folded in a gesture that his species used to indicate deep shame. The destruction of Han's fleet hadn't just been a military defeat. It had shattered the fundamental assumptions that the Empire based its entire society upon. "If I may," came a new voice from the diplomatic gallery. All attention turned to Ambassador Sarah, the human representative to the Galactic Council. She was a small woman by human standards, barely over 5 feet tall, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. To most of the assembled aliens, she looked exactly like what they expected from the species they had categorized as mild paradise. "Ambassador," Counselor Prime acknowledged. "The Council recognizes the human representative." Sarah stood slowly, her movements careful and measured. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady, but somehow it carried throughout the vast chamber without amplification. "Honored counselors, I want to address the concerns and misconceptions that have clearly arisen from recent events at New Terra. First, I want to state unequivocally that humanity did not initiate the conflict. Our forces acted purely in self-defense against an unprovoked attack on a civilian colony." Representative Oss's form ground again as he shifted aggressively. "Civilian colony? Those ships that destroyed Admiral Han's fleet were military vessels operated by trained soldiers." "You're absolutely correct," Sarah replied with a slight smile. "They were military vessels operated by trained soldiers. Specifically, they were operated by instructors and students at our Special Operations Training Facility on New Terra. What you witnessed was a training exercise response to an actual threat." The chamber erupted in various forms of alien exclamations. Ambassador Ra's bioluminescent patches flickered rapidly, while several of the representatives began rapid chittering conversations among themselves. "Training facility?" Crystalline form pulsed with what might have been confusion. Are you suggesting that what we witnessed was not your species' primary military capability? I'm saying exactly that, Sarah confirmed. New Terra houses one of several specialized training programs for human special forces. The personnel who engaged the fleet were either instructors teaching advanced combat tactics or students in their final phase of training. She paused to let this information sink in before continuing. I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about human civilization that needs to be addressed. When humanity first joined the galactic community, our diplomatic missions naturally originated from Earth, our most populous and diplomatically oriented world. This led to assumptions about our species that, while understandable, are incomplete. Ambassador Ra leaned forward in her aquatic chamber. Please elaborate, Ambassador. Earth is indeed what we classify as a paradise world, mild climate, stable weather patterns, abundant resources, and relatively low gravity. It's where roughly 60% of humanity lives, and it's where we conduct most of our diplomatic, cultural, and scientific endeavors. But Earth is not the only world humanity calls home. Sarah activated her personal holographic display, showing a three-dimensional map of human space. Dozens of star systems lit up, each marked with different colored indicators. Humanity has established colonies on 47 different worlds across 31 star systems. Of these, Earth and 6 others are classified as paradise worlds suitable for general population. 15 are classified as standard habitability worlds that require minimal environmental modification. 12 are classified as harsh environment worlds that require significant technological adaptation. She paused, and when she continued, her voice carried a weight that seemed to press down on the entire chamber. The remaining 13 worlds are classified as Define, Counselor Prime requested, though something in her harmonic resonance suggested she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Worlds where the environment is actively hostile to human life on a constant basis. Worlds with gravity ranges from 2.5 to 4.2 times Earth standard. Atmospheric pressures that would crush most ships designed for standard environments. Surface temperatures that range from -40 to +60 degrees Celsius. Weather patterns that include storms with winds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour, electrical discharges measured in the billions of volts, and precipitation that ranges from sulfuric acid to molten metal fragments. The chamber had gone completely silent. Even the constant background hum of environmental systems seemed muted. These worlds are also home to indigenous life forms that have evolved to thrive in such conditions. Predators with exoskeletal armor that can deflect military-grade weapons. Pack hunters with reaction times measured in milliseconds. Aerial threats that can strike from altitudes where most aircraft cannot function. Environmental hazards that shift and change without warning. Representative Oss found his voice first. Why would any species willingly colonize such places? Sarah's smile was sad but proud. Because they're there. Because they contain resources that can't be found anywhere else. Because they offer opportunities for research and development that paradise worlds cannot provide. And because there are humans who are drawn to such challenges. The individuals who choose to live on don't do so casually. They undergo years of physical and mental conditioning. They develop reflexes, endurance, and tactical thinking that simply can't be achieved in safer environments. They become something more than baseline human, not through genetic modification, but through constant adaptation to environments that demand excellence or death. Ambassador Eth finally spoke, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that indicated deep distress. Are you saying that the forces that destroyed our fleet were not even your military's elite units? I'm saying that the forces that defended New Terra were trainees and instructors from one of our special operations programs. They weren't our elite units. They were people learning to become our elite units, taught by veterans who had already mastered the curriculum. The implications of this statement rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. If training units could annihilate a fleet, what could fully operational human military forces accomplish? How many? Ra asked, her bioluminescent patterns now pulsing in rhythm with what appeared to be fear. How many soldiers does humanity possess? Sarah consulted her personal tablet before responding. Current active duty special forces personnel number approximately 200,000 across all 13 colonies. Reserve and veteran populations add another 800,000. However, those numbers don't include standard military personnel who have training or civilian populations living on who could be mobilized if necessary. 200,000, Oss repeated numbly. 200,000 soldiers like the ones who destroyed a 3,000-ship fleet. Actually, the soldiers at New Terra were primarily from Station, our colony. The environmental conditions there are relatively mild compared to our older colonies like Gehenna Prime or Tartarus 7. The veterans training on those worlds have been conditioning themselves for decades in environments that make look like a vacation resort. Counselor Prime, crystalline form, dimmed significantly. Ambassador, why was the galactic community not informed of these capabilities during humanity's integration process? Because you never asked, Sarah replied simply. Every question the Council posed during our integration review was about our diplomatic capabilities, our trade potential, our scientific achievements, and our cultural compatibility. Nobody asked about our military capabilities because nobody considered us a potential threat. We were the mild paradise who posed no danger to established galactic powers. Moreover, she continued, humanity has a long-standing policy of not revealing our full capabilities unless directly threatened. We prefer diplomacy and trade to warfare, but we also prepare for the possibility that others might not share those preferences. The chamber remained silent as the assembled representatives absorbed this information. The galactic balance of power had just shifted dramatically, and everyone present was trying to understand what it meant for their own species and alliances. There is another factor that needs to be considered, Sarah said, breaking the silence. The attack on New Terra has been broadcast throughout human space. Every Special Forces veteran, every soldier who's ever wondered how they might fare against alien military technology now has an answer. Recruitment for military service has increased by over 4,000% in the past week. Representative Oss's rocky form seemed to slump. You're saying that attacking New Terra has actually strengthened your military. I'm saying that the Empire has inadvertently given humanity's warrior culture exactly what it's always craved, a worthy opponent and proof that our methods are effective. There are human soldiers throughout space who are now volunteering for combat duty, specifically, because they want to test themselves against forces. Ambassador Eth spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. What does humanity want from the Empire? Sarah turned to face the representative directly. Ambassador Eth, humanity wants the same thing we've always wanted, to live in peace, to trade freely, and to explore the galaxy without interference. The attack on New Terra was unprovoked and unjustified. However, we recognize that it was likely based on incomplete information and cultural misunderstandings. We are prepared to offer the Empire a simple arrangement. Acknowledge that the attack was a mistake, provide compensation for damages to New Terra, and formally agree to respect human territorial boundaries. In return, humanity will not pursue retaliatory action against worlds. And if the Empire refuses? Eth asked, though his posture suggested he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. Then the Empire will discover what happens when special forces move from defensive to offensive operations, Sarah replied matter-of-factly. And I can assure you, Ambassador, that is a lesson your people do not want to learn. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of various alien respiratory and communication systems. Finally, Counselor Prime spoke. The Council will take these revelations under consideration. We recommend that all member species review their assessments of human capabilities and adjust their diplomatic approaches accordingly. This session is adjourned. As the representatives began filing out of the chamber, Ambassador Ra approached Sarah's diplomatic pod. Her bioluminescent patterns had shifted to colors that the human ambassador recognized as indicating cautious respect. Ambassador, she said quietly, the Confederacy has always valued our relationship with humanity. We hope that these new revelations will not affect our friendship. Sarah smiled warmly. Ambassador Ra, they have always treated humanity with respect and fairness. That friendship remains as strong as ever. We have no quarrel with peaceful species who approach us in good faith. But those who approach with hostile intent. Sarah's smile didn't waver, but somehow it became infinitely more dangerous. They learn why it's called a ambassador, and why the humans who survive on them are the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. As the chamber emptied, word was already spreading throughout galactic civilization. Humanity wasn't the mild, harmless species everyone had assumed. They were apex predators who had been hiding in plain sight, and the galaxy's established powers were about to discover just how dangerous a cornered human could be. The response. Captain pressed her face against the reinforced viewport of the transport ship Hadian's Crossing and watched the stars shift as they dropped out of hyperspace. After 36 hours of travel from Gehenna Prime, she could finally see their destination, Tau 7, the staging area for humanity's first major offensive operation in galactic history. The sight that greeted her was unlike anything she had ever seen, even during her 15 years serving in the Gehenna Prime Special Operations Division. Ships filled the space around Tau 7 like metallic fish in a vast ocean. Not just human ships, though those made up the majority, but vessels from every human colony world, especially the... "Holy shit," whispered Sergeant Ironwood from beside her. The massive man from station had been unusually quiet during the journey, but seeing the assembled fleet had finally broken his silence. "How many ships is that?" "Computer estimates 8,743 vessels of various classes," replied Lieutenant, not looking up from her tactical tablet. The slight woman from Absolute Zero Colony spoke with the precision of someone who had survived on a world where a single miscalculation meant death by freezing, ranging from single-person fighters to dreadnought-class battleships. Nodded, still staring out the viewport in amazement. When the call had gone out for volunteers following the New Terra incident, she had expected a significant response. Had always been eager to prove themselves, and the demonstration of human superiority over forces had been like blood in the water to predators. But this exceeded even her most optimistic projections. "Look at those configurations," Ironwood said, pointing to a group of ships with unusual angular designs. "Those are from Hellscape Prime. I've never seen their military vessels in person before." "And there," added, indicating a cluster of ships that seemed to ripple and shift even as they watched. "Mirage World stealth corvettes. I didn't even know they had a fleet." Studied the assembled armada with professional interest. Every colony had developed its own approach to survival and warfare based on the specific challenges of their environment. Gehenna Prime, her home, dealt with crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, and predators that could bite through starship hull plating. The soldiers it produced were physically powerful, incredibly durable, and specialists in heavy weapons and armor. But Absolute Zero Colony, where originated, had different challenges. Temperatures that could freeze human blood in seconds, ice storms that moved faster than most aircraft, and predators that used the extreme cold as a weapon. The warriors from that world were masters of precision, patience, and technology that could function in impossible conditions. Station Ironwood's home combined crushing gravity with unstable geological activity. Its soldiers learned to fight while the ground literally shifted beneath their feet, to maintain combat effectiveness while buildings collapsed around them, and to adapt to changing conditions faster than most people could think. And now representatives from all 13 colonies were gathered in one place, along with volunteers from harsh environment worlds and even some standard habitability colonies. It was the largest concentration of human military power ever assembled, and it was aimed at one target, the Empire. "Attention all personnel," came the announcement over the ship's communication system. "We are beginning docking procedures at Tau Station. All Special Forces personnel report to briefing rooms immediately upon disembarkation. This is not a drill." Shouldered her gear bag and checked her weapons one final time. The plasma rifle from Gehenna Prime was rated for use in gravity fields up to 6 times Earth standard and had enough power to punch through reinforced bulkheads. Her sidearm was a kinetic projectile weapon that fired rounds at 30% of light speed, fast enough to penetrate most alien armor and cause devastating damage to anything soft behind it. But more important than the weapons was the conditioning. 15 years on Gehenna Prime had transformed her from a baseline human into something that could function in environments that would kill most sapient species within minutes. Her bones were denser than steel. Her muscles could generate force that would crush standard gravity aliens, and her reflexes had been honed by constant combat against predators that moved faster than most vehicles. The docking process took 20 minutes, during which observed more of the assembled fleet. Ships from different colonies had wildly different designs reflecting their origins. The vessels from Volcano World were heavily armored and designed to operate in extreme heat, with hulls that glowed red-hot during normal operations. Ships from Hurricane Planet had aerodynamic profiles and advanced maneuvering systems that allowed them to function in atmospheric conditions that would tear apart conventional spacecraft. Most impressive were the ships from the oldest colonies, Tartarus 7 and Inferno Prime. These vessels had been built by humans who had survived for generations in environments so hostile that their construction materials and technologies were classified secrets. The ships themselves seemed to radiate an aura of barely contained lethality that made even experienced soldiers nervous. "Sergeant Ironwood, Lieutenant, Captain," came a voice as they exited the docking tube. Turned to see a figure in the black uniform of Terran High Command, with insignia she recognized as belonging to Special Operations Command Central. "I'm Colonel Sarah Martinez. You're to come with me immediately." Studied the colonel as they walked through the station corridors. Martinez was clearly from one of the older colonies. Her movements had the fluid precision of someone who had learned to function under extreme gravity, and there was a hardness to her features that spoke of years spent in environments that showed no mercy. More telling were the scars visible on her hands and neck, the kind that came from surviving encounters with predators that could cut through military armor. "Colonel," ventured as they entered a high-security section of the station. "What exactly is our mission?" The briefing documents were deliberately vague. "That's because the mission is classified at the highest levels," Martinez replied without breaking stride. "What I can tell you is that the Empire has made a critical error in judgment. They've interpreted our restraint as weakness and our diplomatic preferences as inability to project military power." They passed through multiple security checkpoints, each one scanning them with equipment didn't recognize. The deeper they went into the station, the more apparent it became that this was not a standard military operation. "The Empire has refused our terms," Martinez continued as they approached a massive blast door marked with warnings in multiple human languages. "They've declared that the incident at New Terra was merely the opening move in a campaign to subjugate human space. They believe that by attacking civilian colonies, they can force us to surrender without having to face our actual military forces." The blast door iris opened to reveal a briefing chamber unlike anything had ever seen. The room was filled with representatives from every colony, along with senior officers from Human Space Command. At the center of the room was a holographic display showing the Empire in detail. Every major world, every fleet concentration, every strategic asset. "Ladies and," came a voice that commanded instant attention. Turned to see General Blackwood, the legendary commander of Tartarus 7 Special Operations. The general was a living legend among forces, a woman who had personally led raids against some of the most dangerous predators in human space and survived encounters that had killed entire battalions. "The Empire has declared war on humanity," Blackwood announced without preamble. "They believe that our defensive victory at New Terra was a fluke, and that by targeting civilian populations, they can avoid facing our military capabilities. They are about to learn the difference between human civilian populations and human military forces." The holographic display zoomed in on a star system deep in space. Recognized it from intelligence briefings. Prime, the Empire's capital world and home to over 15 billion. "Operation Nemesis will be humanity's response to the Empire's aggression," General Blackwood continued. "We will not target civilian populations. We will not destroy infrastructure necessary for basic survival. We will not engage in the kind of total warfare that the Empire appears to favor." Felt a moment of confusion, which must have shown on her face because General Blackwood smiled, an expression that was somehow more terrifying than any scowl. "Instead, we will do something far more effective. We will demonstrate to the Empire and to the entire galaxy exactly what special forces are capable of when they stop holding back." The display shifted to show detailed schematics of military installations throughout their empire. Fleet bases, training facilities, research stations, and command centers were highlighted in red. Every major military installation will be neutralized simultaneously, not destroyed, neutralized. We will capture their fleets intact, their commanders alive, and their military technology undamaged. We will do this without causing civilian casualties and without damaging non-military infrastructure. The room was completely silent as the implications sank in. Realized that what General Blackwood was proposing was far more difficult than simple destruction. It required surgical precision on a galactic scale, overwhelming force applied with perfect restraint, and coordination between units operating across dozens of light-years of space. "General," came a voice from the back of the room, turned to see Colonel Steele, the officer who had commanded the defense of New Terra. "What you're describing it's impossible, the logistics alone." "Colonel Steele," Blackwood replied with that terrifying smile, "you've been training on Paradise Worlds and fighting defensive actions. You've never seen what special forces can accomplish when they go on the offensive." She gestured to the assembled officers. "Captain will lead Team Gehenna in the capture of the 7th Fleet's command vessel. Sergeant Ironwood will coordinate forces in the simultaneous assault on 6 fleet bases in the Inner Rim. Lieutenant will oversee absolute zero operations against their research installations." Felt her heart rate increase as she realized the scope of what was being proposed. "General, the 7th Fleet alone has over 800 ships. How exactly are we supposed to capture the command vessel without destroying half their fleet?" "The same way we survived on Gehenna Prime, Captain, by being faster, stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than anything they can imagine." Blackwood's expression became deadly serious. "The Empire believes they understand warfare because they've conquered weak civilizations and defeated unprepared opponents. They're about to face enemies who learn to fight by surviving against forces of nature that would destroy their entire civilization." The general activated a new display showing human ships moving through space in formations that seemed to defy physics. "Every ship in this fleet is crewed by personnel who have survived environments that would kill soldiers in seconds. Every soldier carries weapons designed to function in conditions that would destroy equipment. Every officer has been trained in tactics that assume the enemy has every possible advantage except one: the will to survive that can only be forged in places where survival is never guaranteed." Studied the tactical displays and began to understand the true scope of the operation. Hundreds of teams would strike simultaneously across space, moving faster than the Empire's communication networks could respond, hitting with precision that would make resistance impossible. "The Empire wanted to see what human military forces could do," General Blackwood said. "They're about to discover that everything they thought they knew about warfare was wrong. They've never fought an enemy that evolved in environments where the very air is a weapon, where gravity can crush the unwary, where predators hunt in packs and show no mercy." She looked around the room, making eye contact with officers from every colony. "When this operation is complete, the Empire will understand that humanity is not a species to be conquered. They will understand that our preference for diplomacy is a choice, not a weakness. And they will understand that when special forces go to war, the very concept of invincible becomes meaningless." The briefing continued for 3 hours, covering every aspect of the most complex military operation in galactic history. As listened to the detailed plans, she felt a familiar sensation, the same combination of excitement and terror that she experienced before hunting the apex predators of Gehenna Prime. The Empire thought they were invincible. They were about to learn what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object, and along with thousands of other veterans, was going to be there to teach them the lesson personally.